The Chia blockchain almost stopped. That is the news from this weekend. Lucas, I wanted to bring this to your attention. We don't know the full details of what happened, but let me bring something up so we can chat about this. But we got a note from Gene saying that everybody needs to upgrade to 2.5.1 and nobody can make blocks if you're using an older client. That it's not exactly a hard fork, but it's kind of on the level of it because if you're not running a very specific piece of software, you can't use the chain anymore, which is a pretty significant event to have occurred. Let me bring this up quick.
Go ahead, bring it up. And I'm glad we're talking about this. I saw maybe last Friday, I saw that somebody had reported that one farmer had won 12 XCH, and I assume it has to do with this. And then I saw sort of the back and forth going on with Twitter, Gene's post here with regards to this new release, and that some sort of transaction had messed up the farms of the farmers on Chia. So what exactly happened here? What can you tell? What do you know so far?
Well, a specific transaction got into the mempool. And so, we've talked about like what different parts of blockchains are and whatever. And so the mempool is a place where transactions are proposed. And what happens is when you go to make a block, usually the default way that you would consider what transactions you want to go into a block are the ones that make you the most money. So you go into the mempool and you say, well, if I'm going to make a block, I can make the most money by collecting up the highest amount of fees of whatever's in the mempool. And so this mempool is a place where farmers in the Chia ecosystem can go to find transactions that are proposed to be in a block, and then they can take whatever transactions they want. So most farmers are not running some custom software with some custom algorithm. They just use whatever is there in the Chia full node. But it's not always the case. There has started to be a diversity of clients out there. So there's stuff like NoSSD, and there's GigaHorse, and then there's Fast Farmer. And so there's a lot of diverse clients that have cropped up in recent years in the Chia ecosystem. And so it's not everybody is just running Chia's software. But in Chia's software, apparently what has happened is anybody who is running a client that is not 2.5.1 could not make a block. So if you were to try to make a block using whatever the algorithm is that looks at the mempool, whatever transaction made it in to the mempool would cause blocks to not be produced. And so the repercussions of this were that blocks weren't getting made, and that one of the consequences of this was, here we are sitting in around, whatever it is, 18 exabytes of net space, that a whole bunch of net space essentially got knocked offline, lost 2 exabytes in a matter of few hours here. So that started to recover as clients have upgraded. But yeah, the situation is that this transaction, the mempool, made it so that blocks couldn't get made. So it's like all old clients got knocked offline. So where it used to be that you could just run any old version of Chia, that's no longer the case. If you're not running 2.5.1 of the official Chia client, you can't make a block if certain types of transactions make it into the mempool. So I don't know if this is like the long term you have to run this, but like if those kinds of transactions are frequently in the mempool, if you actually tried to make a block and you tried to make a block out of that transaction, you would not be able to.
Well, it seems, and maybe CNI has ironed out this issue, but what do you know about the transaction that caused this to spiral?
I don't know a whole lot about it. I'm not sure if somebody was experimenting with some new code that had never been used, or if this is related to blocks now being allowed to be full. That was one thing that has been a default setting in the Chia full node for a while, is that there is this artificial reduction in the total amount of transactions that could go into a block. So there's a parameter that you can set in the config file that says, how big do you want blocks to be? And I think originally it was set to 50% or something like that. So block sizes were clamped to half of their normal size, but it was a client side setting. So a lot of people were like, well, I can make more money if I change this setting. And then I think over time, as blocks have started to get more pressure on them and in anticipation of what was going to be happening with Permuto, they anticipate that they're going to have need for a lot more block space. And so this parameter has been adjusted by default to be larger. And so it's speculated that this may be related to block size in some way. But what Gene says in this exchange is that there's a post-mortem that's coming, and that there's going to be more details about how it actually happened and what's really taken place here. I think it was in this thread where he said that.
Yeah, there was a lot of sub threads in that thread, so it's hard to find any anyone tweet and all of that. What did you hear from the farming community, or the other farmers? That I don't know if you talk with other farmers. Was this surprise? Were they upset? Like, what was sort of the takeaway from the farmers?
Well, I was surprised, honestly. This is not the kind of a thing that you expect. I mean, you don't normally have some sort of an update that's required for everybody. That usually there's some bug that's introduced in a newer version and then it gets fixed. So it's like if you had 2.5.0, you need to update to 2.5.1 because we pushed something that didn't go right and old clients aren't affected. So this is a pretty substantive bug, and I guess it's been there for a while, and it's only really because of, I don't know, recent adjustments to the entire ecosystem that have been happening. I suspect. But yeah, the response that I heard from other farmers was surprise. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe like we have to rush out and upgrade to a new version. And then it was all hands on deck, drop everything, go update nodes, because if not, essentially you're going to stop earning any block rewards. And the ones that might be most affected by this are pools, because I think, given how pooling works, what goes on here is when you're hooked up to a pool, they don't know if you can actually make a block or not. And so the way that they test whether you can make a block is they send you something called a partial. And a partial is like a little fake proof that you can actually do what you say you can do. Because at some point, you're going to be able to make a block. You're going to win a block. And so they want to test and continuously validate. And so they actually pay you based on the number of partials that that you can demonstrate that you're doing over time. And so if there are farmers out there that are running the wrong software and the pools don't have a way to detect if you're running the wrong version of software, it could look like you're contributing to the pool's overall net space, but when it comes time for you to actually make a block, you wouldn't be able to make one. So this could affect pools' earnings, their luck over time, especially if there are not easy ways to detect the version of clients and to ban them if they're running the wrong version of the software.
Hmm. And you mentioned CNI adjusting the parameters of the block sizes. How much has that gone on? How much adjustment to the block sizes has gone on in the history of Chia, and have you seen more fees, more transactions being pushed into the mempools in the wake of the Permuto announcement, or is that a change that's still coming?
The only time we saw significant adjustment of fees was during the whole inscriptions phase. When I don't know if it was the team out of China that tried to popularize doing those inscriptions, which was really bizarre to a lot of people in Chia. It's like, why do we need inscriptions? We have real covenants. Like, this is kind of silly. But yeah, there was this phase of time where we were inscribing a lot of data into blocks, and that made blocks get really, really full, and that caused fees to go up. So no, I don't think so. I think fees have been kind of low, actually. And when I said in anticipation of and changing these parameters, I just know that there has been fee pressure, and that I've heard that the block size restrictions were going to start coming off, and in a lot of ways the block size restrictions are driven by minimum spec. So if you're validating blocks and you're doing it on a Raspberry Pi, um, really full blocks might cause you to fall behind. And if you fall behind, you can't really catch up. It's not easy to, anyway. Like if you start to not be able to process blocks at the speed of the chain, and you get behind by 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks, you're going to continuously get further and further behind, unless somehow processing really like lowers down, and you don't have to have as much processing later so that you can catch up. But if you're in a pretty consistently blocks are taking a certain amount of processing time and you're falling behind, you can't catch up. So a lot of this has been driven by testing on minimum spec, and in a lot of ways I think Chia has adhered to Raspberry Pi 4. I think we might have switched to Raspberry Pi 5 recently as a minimum spec, but yeah, it's been driven by that, is what kept the block size smaller.
Hmm. And when we spoke with Art, we talked about the changes coming for the plot formats. We're getting a lot closer to what he had projected as to be the timeline for the release of that. Have you heard anything? Have you heard anything in at the parts store with regards to the new plot format?
I haven't, not since we checked in on it last time. I've heard some rumblings that the plot format's mostly cooked and that things are ready to go, but I don't. Yeah, I haven't heard much else beyond that.
Hmm. Um, and so probably no relation between this bug and any adjustments that were going on with that.
I don't think so, because if they've got those plots out there, I don't know that they're widely being used on mainnet or being used on mainnet at all.
Gotcha. Well, any takeaways as you look at this issue? What sort of bee does this put in your bonnet when you look at it?
Well, just that it was a close call, like Chia almost stopped making blocks. That if it hadn't been for the diversity of clients out there in the ecosystem, we could have easily been in a situation where Chia would have stopped making blocks, and that would have been a pretty unfortunate situation to have occurred. I mean, bugs do happen, things can occur, but it's unfortunate when they do, and the Chia has largely been resilient to that so far, but no piece of software is perfect, and as we spend more time exploring everything that Chia is capable of doing, then we're going to find issues as we go forward. So, I
And
mean,
you said that Gigahorse and Fast Farmer, the other farmers were not affected by this, and so they kept um, clients who were or nodes that were running that software continued to be able to make blocks.
no, I was pointing out that there was a diversity. I think actually Gigahorse had to update too. At least actually it's on the screen there. So Gigahorse actually released a newer version. I would anticipate, probably because they had some similar type of issue in how they were actually doing things. Yeah, so I'm not sure of the full breadth of the different clients, but it's been speculated that it was like NoSSD and a couple of other of the block producers were the ones that carried the ball while this issue cropped up. So there were a couple of clients that were capable of keep going of still producing blocks, but I don't think it was Gigahorse that did it. I think it was no SSD and maybe one other.
Hmm, okay. Luna says Fast Farmer author was affected. So
No, no. Luna is the author of Fast Farmer. He's saying it was affected.
Aha, okay.
Yeah, because some of these use remote nodes, right? Like they're using these thin clients, and so they don't actually have a full node directly. And so if you have a thin client and you are connected to some other remote node, then you're relying on that remote node for some of the interactions. And so that's what ends up driving whether certain clients were affected or not. It's like what code base were you using, whether you're a thin client and you're ultimately reliant on some full node somewhere. And I'm not even sure if we have like a full node that is completely independent of Chia yet. There may be one out there that really hasn't been publicly released that some clients are using, but I think almost everybody that's running a full node is ultimately running a Chia full node. So these thin client, Flex Farmer style clients, they require some other remote full node. And so if that remote full node was running anything other than 2.5.1, they would have been affected in this way.
We have talked, or you've told me before about the importance of having your own dedicated node, or maybe a private node for um, whenever you're publishing blogs. Why is it so? Um, why are there so many clients that do not have their own node, that do not have a dedicated node?
It requires a different set of hardware to run it. You can I mean, like, so Evergreen's a good example of this, right? Evergreen did not ship with an SSD. And so to try to run the database on a bunch of drives, it's probably possible, if you striped the drives in a certain way and you configured it, whatever. I mean, there would be a certain amount of work that you'd have to do to get that enough throughput, but essentially you need a certain amount of read write IO capacity on the database to be able to fully validate blocks. And if you can't fully validate blocks, you really can't run a full node. So that's a piece of hardware that's required to be able to run a full node. And so certain clients don't have that. Like a Raspberry Pi by default doesn't ship with an SSD. It you can hook it up to some sort of a uh, you know a like a drive, but you have to plug that in. It doesn't come by default with any configuration that you can get from, say, CanaKit or somebody like that. So you have to add some additional hardware to it, and that's what's required to run a full node. So the specification from Chia says that's what is required is some IO on drives, and if you have that, then you can run a full node. So if you want to run a really 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 thin low power node, then you you would connect to a remote thing. And then in the ecosystem for, like, say, gigahorse, that if you're running compressed plots, then you might need a GPU to decompress the plots. And so there's a bunch of nodes out there that don't have GPUs, and they're using remote decompression, and they're paying some amount of their earnings to those centralized providers that are giving those GPUs. So that's kind of the ecosystem that we're in right now. Is you might be running a thin client, or you might be running a thin client with compressed plots, and then you would need to either have a remote full node or a remote full node and a bank of GPUs to decompress your plots.
As you talk, uh, or as I think about it, in my mind, I know we talk about the minimum specifications of Raspberry Pi, the things that Chia can be farmed on, but I always assumed that people are using more robust systems. But is the power consumption that um, I guess if the power consumption is that important, then uh, y- it would stand to reason a lot of people are using these light nodes.
I mean, certainly that's been part of the narrative of Chia for a super long time, and that minimum specification's been there for a long time. I don't know about the power thing particularly, though. I Ever since we got into the world of GPU both plotting and to decompression, the whole power narrative has shifted substantively. If you're willing to throw GPUs in the mix and you're willing to absorb whatever that power hit is, and it's not necessarily obvious that it's easy to make that work. I mean, it's the same dynamics of Bitcoin. In Bitcoin, you've got to have competitive power prices to make those higher energy systems worthwhile, right? I mean, it's like, would you just buy the coin or would you farm it? Like, if you have access to cheap power, then you might not have any other way to easily monetize cheap power other than mining Bitcoin or doing higher energy Chia. So that's sort of what the calculus is on, whether you want to use the higher energy configurations of Chia is just like, what is your energy price? And if your energy price is high, it probably doesn't make sense. You must just go buy the Chia. But if you've got access to cheap power, then throwing GPUs into the mix and having a bunch of compressed plots, that can be a very winning combo. Now, is it better than mining Bitcoin? I don't know. You got to do those calculuses yourself, but that's how that whole equation sort of sorts out. And it sounds like from Luna here, who is chiming in on what's going on, it sounds like Evergreen still hasn't updated, so they're still encountering this bug. So as far as how much net space is being affected and how much the ecosystem is still being affected by this bug, there are certain centralized components of what's going on in the Chia ecosystem, and so it sounds like that still hasn't been resolved.
Yeah, at some point, if gold and silver continue to go up, people will be mining their electronics in a very different way.
Yeah, that's right. You go out and collect up a bunch of tech waste and rip the gold out of it. I know that's been going on for a long time. I actually watched a video of how some of that's done in India, because I know a lot of e-waste ends up in both China and India. And man, that looked toxic as hell to go and do that kind of stuff. I can't even imagine. You're just like scooping gold off the slag of a big pile of molten metal and plastic.
I know there are operations that actually, that burn e-waste in burn it in a chamber or whatnot, and then collect all of the different metals that slide on out of there. So um, maybe that's what we're going to see in the future for for the every American household, a foamy what was that? Foamy. Did you ever see the foamy?
No, foamy.
The only thing I think of when I hear that is Foamy the Squirrel.
I don't know who Foamy the Squirrel is, Rusty.
That's an old internet show. It's a classic, cult classic.
No, Foamy was this little a food plus processor blender that you put all your food waste into, and it came out with potting soil. So anyway, never took off. I thought maybe it had wheels, but guess it didn't take off. But well, Grant, other Chia news, or is that all that you wanted to cover with regards to the issue with the production of blocks on Chia?
Well, we briefly touched on it, but I think one thing that's really important to talk about here is client diversity. We sometimes talk about blockchains and what existential risks exist. If you have largely a monoculture, like a single code base, then a single bug in that code base can affect the entire chain, and that's been demonstrated repeatedly in the world of blockchains. And so client diversity is really, really critical. And I'd say, we do talk about Nakamoto coefficient as one important part of, how strong is this chain, right? But another one I think that is really, really important is client diversity, because it says that if you have a bunch of different pieces of software that are out there running, and they're completely disjoint code bases, then a bug in one is unlikely to affect the entire ecosystem. It's resilient to that. And so when a blockchain gets to the point where it has multiple different clients, and particularly multiple different full nodes that have completely independent code bases, and a certain percentage of the overall consensus generation of that chain is diverse. Because if you have 2% of the consensus mechanism running some other software, like then if there's a bug in that 98%, then only 2% of the chain can still produce blocks, and you might end up in a situation where a substantive amount of the chain is knocked offline and only this tiny little subset is. And in that situation, that's where you could have one of these exploits take place. If you wanted to attack a chain, it would be during a period like that where a bug that was affecting the majority of the nodes. Then you go and exploit that problem. So client full node diversity is really important in blockchains, and we are somewhat in a situation where we're there, but I don't know that we are fully in Chia. Like, we need a fully independent full node that is completely divorced from the Chia blockchain or from CNI's implementation of the full node before we're really resilient to this kind of stuff. That's a critical watershed moment that needs to happen, and I hope to see that take place at some point. I know at Evergreen, we were thinking about this a lot. We really, really wanted to make our own full node software, but never quite got anything released. But it was always a goal that we had to have our own full node software and to release it publicly. So I'm still looking towards the day when somebody or some team or some group actually releases one, and it'll be a big day for Chia, because it means that these existential risks are mitigated.
And do you think it will be will it be a company that's making farming equipment, or what other sort of players do you think that might invest the time and the money to develop their own full node apart from Evergreen?
Somebody that really needed it, I guess, if they ran into some sorts of situations that they couldn't get things done with the Python code base, maybe. I mean, and Chia has started to migrate a lot of the code to Rust, so they've been working through a big rewrite of all of the Chia consensus software into Rust. That's been ongoing for it's the better part of maybe almost 2 years that it's been worked on internally as a big project. Through some effort like that, maybe that a team might encounter the need for this. It could be somebody like maybe Dexy, if they start to really realize that they have some sort of bots that they want to run or infrastructure that they're trying to run, and they're just getting frustrated with the code base, that exists, and they needed it to do different things, and they felt like they didn't want to have to rely on a fork of the Python code base. They might drive something like that. Efficiency would be another one, maybe, if you're trying to run it on a client and you said, I really want to be able to run this on really low end hardware, and I need really efficient code, and for some reason the Python code base just really wasn't suited to that. That might be another thing that would drive it.
And as you look at this and see, like, maybe this is a point of vulnerability due to the lack of resiliency, are there other things that you look at Chia and say, oh, this could also be better? While we're thinking about making it more robust here, are there other bottlenecks that you look at Chia and see?
I mean, I don't like seeing this drop in net space. I mean, we were substantively bigger as far as the total amount of net space in Chia, and that's kind of the thing that you look at as far as the security of the chain. So in Bitcoin, when we look at that, it's the total amount of hashing power. So in Chia, it's the total amount of net space, and net space has been eroding over time as the price of the coin has gone down, as it's gotten harder to be efficient and profitable in this ecosystem, as GPUs came into the mix, and then people converted to that, and then the price of the coins fell and it was harder to make money. So if this net space number drops to a certain amount, we could easily be into a situation where GPU renting attacks could be a thing. If you could go out and get your hands on enough GPUs for some limited amount of time. You could mess with the chain in a substantive way, and you could do some nasty stuff, because you'd essentially be over that 51% threshold. And it's been speculated that it was really hard to do that, but now that we have compressed plots in the mix, it might not be that hard to do that if net space falls to some number. And I don't know exactly what that calculus is. So I think it's still looking at that as one of those risks. Is we really don't want to see net space fall below a certain level, because it might make a GPU attack possible. So other than client diversity, that's the only kind of things that are still on my mind. Is I don't like seeing that erosion of net space. And I guess we could just look at what it was like for some period of time. Let me just refresh that net space.
Still not back yet. I don't know if you can see it on your screen.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh wow, like I'm getting a substantive glitch on my computer, so I'm not not exactly sure what's happening here, but I like
you're under attack.
Yeah, something's going on. I'm starting to lose my drive or something. That's what I expect.
Uh-oh.
Yep.
So, well, with regards to the net space, I've kept one eye on it. Not nearly as closely as you, but yeah, when Chia touched $8, I wondered how many more farmers would be shed, and how long it would take us to bounce back. I think what's the price? Back to $14 XCH now. So, but it is nice. It is a nice flex to drop the Nakamoto coefficient to maxis of other chains whenever it's when it's a lot higher. So hopefully we get back there sooner than later.
Give me 1 second. I'll see if I can pull this up in a different browser, and I'll kind of mention what I was talking about. Give me 2 seconds.
Okay, go for it. Uh-oh, we've lost Grant Rusty.
Oh no, we'll see if we can get him back here soon. I was trying to follow the conversation, but it was a little bit out of my league. I don't know if I can keep up with continuing on with the current state of where you guys were at.
That's okay. Grant, I'm sure Grant will be back in a second. We're not going to talk about the blockchain that cannot be named. So don't you dare bring it up.
I won't, but from a kind of a layman's kind of personal view, it was really interesting to follow the conversation about how they were able to implement that kind of file, I guess, into the system of Chia and kind of just wreck house on everything that was going on. I'm glad that they were able to fix it, and it was a quick fix. All you gotta do is update to the newest application of what they're running. But that's interesting that they were able to do that within the blockchain. I'm always really interested and curious to see just how far hackers can go, and I'm just admired by it. I'm blown away at just how far you can talk to a hacker and they can just get into breaking into the FBI or breaking into banks. I remember people used to talk about the dark net. I don't even really know how to get onto the dark net, and like you're just laughing at me when I say that, but it's always just like an extra layer of knowledge of just the computer and technology.
I'm not sure where that is anymore. Yeah, it will be interesting. It will be interesting as CNI releases their postmortem on whatever happened with the transaction that led to this, to know, you know, possibly if what actually was going on there. But it seems like CNI maybe was aware of it from the test nets before um, before this the issue occurred, because they certainly had a patch for it pretty quickly. So I'm not sure. Maybe they just reverted some of these parameters that they were adjusting with an eye towards more block V pressure, but who knows? She is still going. We can. I guess that's the crucial point here. We're still going. Grant, welcome back. I hope you reviewed.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, no, I think it was a browser thing. So let's see if I can make it work.
Yeah, you were pulling up the net space, a longer time window on what the amount of net space was on Chia.
Right. Huh. Yeah, there's some more tricks to doing this on a different browser. Huh. Well, anyway, I'll have to sort that out for next time. I finally encountered a significant enough browser bug. Like some part of me sharing a screen made that not work correctly. So I don't know exactly what happened there. See, a bug can affect anybody, and that's why client diversity is really important. So I switched to a different browser, and right away didn't have the same issue. So yeah, that just kind of made the point. But I think that's pretty much it for the what we wanted to talk about today.
Okay. Well,
apologize for the technical difficulty.
Quite all right. I'm glad to have you here to dig us into the weeds of what was going on with this transaction issue on Chia. So anything else before we close out? Everyone catch us on YouTube. Our number of subscribers is rising. There's a chart that's as pleasing as the net space, or more pleasing than the net space chart. So catch us on YouTube. You can find some of our archived content there. Anything else before you close this out, Grant?
I don't think so. We'll see you tomorrow.
All right. See you.